Use a warm, empathetic Tonima Williams sat at her small wooden table in the tiny London flat she could barely afford, the eviction notice lay in front of her, its bold red letters seeming to shout at her from the white paper, 28 years old, and her life felt like it was falling apart piece by piece. 3 weeks had passed since her boss at the design company had called her into his office. She could still remember the awkward way he had avoided her eyes as he explained that the company was downsizing. Emma had worked there for 4 years, pouring her heart into every project, staying late when needed, and believing she had job security. In just 10 minutes, that security vanished. The rain drummed steadily against her single window, creating a rhythmic soundtrack to her misery. Emma picked up her worn leather wallet and counted the money inside for the third time that day. £18 and 47 pence. That was all she had left in the world. Her savings account, which had taken her years to build, was completely empty now. Every penny had gone toward rent, food, and her mother's medical bills from the final months of her illness. Emma's mother, Susan, had been her best friend, her only family, and her biggest supporter. When cancer took her 6 months ago, Emma lost not just her mother, but her anchor in the world. The job search had become Emma's full-time occupation, but it felt hopeless. She had applied to 43 different companies, sent countless emails, and attended 7 interviews. Each rejection felt like another door slamming shut in her face. The responses were always the same polite phrases about finding other qualified candidates or keeping her resume on file. Emma looked round her small flat. The furniture was second-hand, bought from charity shops when she first moved to London with dreams of becoming a successful graphic designer. The walls were decorated with her own artwork, colorful drawings she had created during happier times. Now those bright pictures seemed to mock her current situation. Her phone sat on the table next to the eviction notice. The bill was overdue by 12 days. Emma wondered how much longer the phone company would wait before cutting off her service. Without a phone, how could potential employers reach her? The worry gnawed at her stomach like hunger. She had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days. The small refrigerator contained only a few slices of bread, some margarine, and a nearly empty jar of jam. Emma had been surviving on tea and toast, rationing even those simple ingredients. The loneliness was perhaps the worst part of her situation. Since her mother's death, Emma had no one to call, no one to share her fears with, and no one who would notice if she disappeared completely. A few friends from university had moved away or grown distant. The isolation felt like a heavy blanket wrapped tightly round her shoulders. As the evening grew darker, Emma considered her limited options. She could ask her landlord for more time, but she had already done that twice. She could try to find work in shops or restaurants, but even those jobs seemed competitive. The thought of becoming homeless terrified her more than anything else. At exactly 9:30, Emma's phone began to ring. The sound startled her in the quiet flat. She stared at the device, afraid to answer. Lately, most calls were from debt collectors or companies demanding payment for bills she could not afford. Her heart began beating faster as she debated whether to pick up. Something inside her, perhaps curiosity or maybe desperation, made her reach for the phone. She pressed the answer button and held it to her ear. "Hello, is this Thomas?" asked a voice on the other end. The speaker was clearly an elderly man with a warm, proper English accent. His tone was gentle and hopeful. Emma felt a moment of disappointment that it was not a job offer, but she responded politely. "No, I'm sorry. You have the wrong number." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Emma could hear the man's breathing and what sounded like a television in the background. "Oh, I do apologize," the man said, and Emma could hear genuine embarrassment in his voice. I was trying to reach my grandson Thomas. My name is Henry." Emma was about to say goodbye and hang up when something in the stranger's voice caught her attention. Beneath his polite words, she heard something familiar, a sadness that echoed her own feelings. It was the sound of someone who was also alone. "That's all right," Emma found herself saying instead of ending the call. "I hope you find him. Are you quite well, dear?" Henry asked with what seemed like genuine concern. "You sound rather sad." The unexpected kindness in his question hit Emma like a gentle wave. When was the last time someone had asked about her well-being? When had anyone last called her dear with such warmth? For the first time in months, Emma felt that someone, even a complete stranger, cared enough to notice her pain. Tears began forming in her eyes as the emotions she had been holding back for weeks suddenly threatened to overflow. Her voice became very quiet as she whispered, "Not really. No, use a warm." Empathetic to Nellie next evening at exactly 9 o'clock, Emma's phone rang again. She had spent the entire day wondering if the kind stranger from the night before would call again. Part of her hoped he would, while another part told her not to expect too much from a chance conversation. When she saw an unknown number on her phone screen, her heart skipped a beat. She answered quickly. "Hello, Emma. This is Henry from last night," came the familiar gentle voice. "I know this might seem rather odd, but I couldn't stop thinking about you today. I wondered if you were feeling any better." Emma felt a warm surprise wash over her. In all her 28 years, she could not remember a stranger caring enough to call back and check on her well-being. Her voice caught slightly as she replied, "You actually called to check on me." "Indeed I did, dear," Henry said with what sounded like a smile in his voice. "My late wife Margaret always told me that when someone crosses your path, there's usually a reason for it. She was a wise woman, my Margaret. Would you mind terribly if we talked for a bit? I find myself rather lonely this evening." Emma settled into her small armchair, pulling a thin blanket round her shoulders. "I would like that very much," she said honestly. "I'm lonely too." Over the next hour, Henry told Emma about himself. He was 74 years old and lived by himself in a small stone cottage in the Cotswolds countryside. He had been married to his beloved Margaret for 50 wonderful years before she passed away from a heart attack 8 months ago. The house felt too quiet now, too empty without her laughter filling the rooms. Henry's grandson Thomas was his only remaining family. The young man lived in Sydney, Australia, where he worked as an engineer. Thomas was a good boy, Henry explained, but he was busy with his own life. He called perhaps once a month, usually when he remembered birthdays or holidays. Emma found herself opening up to Henry in ways she had not expected. She told him about losing her mother to cancer, about the long nights in the hospital, and about how alone she felt in the world. She explained about losing her job and the eviction notice that still sat on her kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Henry listened to every word without interrupting. He did not offer quick solutions or empty promises that everything would be fine. Instead, he simply listened with the patience of someone who understood what real loss felt like. The next evening, Henry called again at 9 o'clock. And the evening after that, soon. Their 9 o'clock phone calls became the highlight of Emma's day. She would sit by her window, watching the London streets below, and wait for Henry's call. During their third conversation, Henry asked Emma about her dreams. Before all this trouble started, what did you want to do with your life? Emma hesitated before answering. "I wanted to illustrate children's books. I know it sounds silly for someone my age, but I used to love drawing stories that would make children happy. I thought maybe I could bring some joy into the world that way." "That doesn't sound silly at all," Henry replied warmly. It sounds beautiful. Do you still draw? Not anymore, Emma admitted. I haven't touched my art supply since my mother got sick. It feels hard now. Like that part of me died with her. Henry was quiet for a moment. Then he said gently, My Margaret loved to bake. After she died, I couldn't bear to go into the kitchen. The smell of flour and sugar reminded me too much of her. But you know what I learned. The things we love don't die with the people we lose. They become gifts we can give to others as the weeks passed. Emma found herself looking forward to 9 o'clock each evening. Henry would share stories about his life with Margaret, about the garden they had built together, and about the small adventures they had taken round England. Emma told Henry about her mother's sense of humour, about the bedtime stories Susan used to tell her, and about the drawings they used to create together on rainy afternoons. One evening, about 3 weeks into their friendship, Henry said something that changed everything for Emma. You know, dear, my Margaret used to say something when times got difficult. She would tell me that our darkest nights often come just before our brightest dawns. She believed that when everything seems impossible, that's when possibility is closest. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes, but for the first time in months, they were not tears of despair. Do you really believe that, Henry? Do you think things can get better? Henry's voice was strong and certain as he replied, With all my heart, Emma, and I believe in you. In these weeks of talking with you, I've heard your kindness, your strength, and your caring heart. You have something special inside you, something the world needs. Don't give up on yourself. Dear girl, for the first time since her mother's death, Emma felt a genuine smile spread across her face. She had found something she thought was lost forever. A friend who truly cared about her well-being. Someone who believed in her when she could not believe in herself. Use a warm, empathetic tone. 3 weeks had passed since Henry first called Emma by mistake, and their evening conversations had become the most important part of both their days. Emma found herself counting the hours until 9 o'clock, when Henry's warm voice would fill her small flat with comfort and hope. On this particular evening, Henry asked a question that would change everything. Emma, dear, you mentioned before that you used to love drawing. I've been thinking about that. What did you enjoy drawing most when you were happier? Emma curled up in her chair, holding the phone close to her ear. She had not talked about our dreams in months, but something about Henry's gentle curiosity made her feel safe to share. Children's books, she admitted quietly. I always dreamed of creating illustrations for stories that would make children smile and laugh. I wanted to draw pictures that would help little ones feel brave when they were scared or hopeful. When they felt sad, her voice grew smaller as she continued. But that seems completely impossible now. I can barely keep a roof over my head, let alone chase after silly dreams like that. Henry's voice became strong and determined. Nothing is impossible, dear Emma, nothing at all. Let me tell you something about my Margaret that might surprise you. Emma listened carefully as Henry shared a story she had never heard before. My beautiful wife didn't always run a bakery, you know. For the first 25 years of our marriage, she worked as a secretary at a law office. She was good at her job, but it wasn't her passion. Margaret loved to bake. She would spend her weekends creating the most wonderful cakes and breads. You could imagine. Henry paused, and Emma could hear the smile in his voice as he remembered his late wife. When Margaret turned 50, she came to me one evening with tears in her eyes. She said she couldn't spend the rest of her life wondering what if. She was absolutely terrified. But she decided to leave her safe job and open a small bakery in our village. Emma felt her heart beating faster as she imagined Margaret's courage. What happened? She was scared every single day for the first year. Henry continued. There were moments when she wanted to give up and go back to her old job. But she kept going. One day at a time. That little bakery became the heart of our village. Children would stop by after school for our special biscuits. And couples would order wedding cakes from her. She brought so much joy to so many people. Emma, and she did it all because she refused to give up on her dream. The next morning, Emma stared at the art supplies she had not touched in over a year. They sat in a dusty box under her bed. Like forgotten treasures from another life, Henry's story about Margaret had planted a seed of possibility in her heart. But she was still afraid to hope too much. That evening, Henry brought up the subject again. Emma, I want to buy you some art supplies. Please let me do this small thing for you. Emma felt touched by his kindness, but also determined to take this first step on her own. Thank you, Henry. But I need to do this myself. I have just enough money left to buy something small. The next day, Emma walked to a nearby art shop with the last £10. She bought a small sketchbook with clean white pages and a set of basic colored pencils. The supplies were simple, but they felt like treasure in her hands. Meanwhile, Emma had been thinking about Henry's loneliness and his love for working with wood. During their next phone call, she made her own suggestion. Henry, you've told me how much you loved woodworking with your father when you were young. Have you thought about finding other people who share that interest? Henry sounded uncertain. I don't know. Dear, I haven't been around people much since Margaret died. I wouldn't know what to say. Maybe you could visit the community center in your village, Emma suggested gently. You might find others who would love to learn from someone with your experience. Henry was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to look into it. If you're brave enough to start drawing again, perhaps I can be brave enough to meet some new people. The following week brought wonderful changes. For both of them, Emma had filled several pages of her sketchbook with simple drawings of flowers, birds, and children playing in parks. The act of creating something beautiful again felt like waking up from a long sleep. Henry had visited the Chipping Camden Community Center and discovered a small group of men who met twice a week to work on wood projects. To his amazement, they welcomed him warmly and were eager to learn from his decades of experience. Soon, he was helping them build birdhouses and small toys for local children. During their evening phone calls, Emma and Henry would share their small victories with each other. Emma would hold her drawings up to her phone's camera, showing Henry her latest sketches over video calls. Henry would describe the excitement on a 7-year-old boy's face when he successfully hammered his first nail into a piece of wood. One evening, as they talked about their day's accomplishments, Emma said something that surprised them both. Henry, I think we're both healing, not just from our losses, but from giving up on ourselves. Henry's voice was warm with understanding as he replied, Yes, dear Emma, I believe you're absolutely right. Sometimes helping others helps us find ourselves again. Use a warm, empathetic tone. 2 months had passed since Henry first dialed Emma's number by mistake, and both their lives had transformed in ways neither could have imagined. Emma's small London flat now buzzed with creative energy. 3 completed sketchbooks sat on her kitchen table, each one filled with colourful drawings that seemed to glow with warmth and hope. Emma had discovered that her art had changed during these months of healing. Her new drawings were different from the work she had created before her mother's illness. These pictures told stories of unlikely friendships, second chances, and the magic that could happen when strangers chose to be kind to each other. She drew elderly people and young people sharing tea, neighbors helping neighbors, and children learning from grandparents they had never met. every evening at 9 o'clock. Emma would show Henry her latest creations during their video calls. She would hold each drawing up to her phone's camera, watching Henry's face light up with genuine delight. His encouragement had given her the confidence to try new techniques and explore different story ideas. Henry had also been busy during these 2 months. The woodworking classes at the community center had become the highlight of his week. He now taught 3 different groups, one for adults who wanted to learn basic carpentry, another for teenagers interested in building furniture, and his favorite group of young children who came after school to make simple toys and decorations. The children especially loved Henry's patient teaching style and his endless supply of stories about the projects he had built with Margaret over the years. He helped them create wooden cars, picture frames for their mothers, and small jewelry boxes that they painted in bright colors on this particular evening in November. Henry had something special to discuss with Emma. His voice carried an excitement she had not heard before as he began their conversation. "Emma, dear, I have an idea that I hope you will consider seriously," Henry said, settling into his favorite armchair by the fireplace. "Do you remember me mentioning my neighbor, Mrs. Patricia Williams? She was Margaret's closest friend for over 30 years. Emma nodded, even though Henry could not see her through the phone. "Yes, you've told me some lovely stories about her. Well, Patricia works for a small publishing company in Oxford. It's called Meadowbrook Press, and they specialize in children's books and stories for families. I showed her some photographs of your drawings last week, and she was absolutely fascinated by them." Emma felt her heart begin to race. The excitement was mixed with a fear so strong it made her hands shake. "Henry, what exactly are you saying? Patricia would very much like to see more of your work. Emma, she thinks your style would be perfect for the kind of books they publish. Would you consider putting together a portfolio to show her?" Emma set down her cup of tea with trembling fingers. The possibility seemed too good to be true, too big to even imagine. What if she doesn't really like my drawings when she sees them properly? What if I'm not good enough for a real publishing company? What if I disappoint her and embarrass you? Henry's voice became gentle but firm, the way it always did when Emma doubted herself. "My dear girl, listen to me carefully. The only real failure in life is never trying at all. Do you know what Margaret used to tell me when I was afraid of something?" Emma wiped away a tear that had started to form. "What did she say?" "Margaret always said that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling afraid and doing something anyway because it matters to you. She said that every time we let fear make our decisions for us, we become a little smaller inside." That night, Emma could barely sleep. She kept thinking about Henry's words and about all the drawings she had created over the past 2 months. Finally, at 3 in the morning, she got up and looked through all her sketchbooks by Lamplight. As she flipped through the pages, Emma realized that she had unknowingly created a complete story. Her drawings showed the journey of friendship between an elderly man living alone in the countryside and a young woman struggling in the city. The pictures told the tale of how a wrong phone call had brought 2 lonely people together and helped them both find purpose again. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Emma carefully selected her best 15 drawings and created a simple story to go with them. She wrote about an elderly man named Harold and a young woman named Lucy who become friends through a Mr. Ken phone call. The story showed how their friendship gave them both the courage to chase their dreams and help others in their communities. Emma's hands shook as she put the drawings into a protective folder. She had created a professional-looking portfolio, complete with a typed story summary and a brief letter introducing herself and her work. Meanwhile, Henry had been inspired by Emma's courage to take a brave step of his own. After months of missing his grandson Thomas, Henry had finally picked up the phone and called Australia. The conversation had been awkward at first, but Thomas had been genuinely happy to hear from his grandfather. During their next evening call, Henry shared his exciting news. "Emma, I did something today that scared me terribly, but I'm so glad I did it." "What happened?" "Henry, I called Thomas. We talked for over an hour, and he's coming to visit me for Christmas. It will be the first time I've seen him since Margaret's funeral." Emma felt tears of joy fill her eyes. "Henry, that's wonderful news. We're both being very brave lately, aren't we?" Emma said, clutching her portfolio against her chest. Henry's voice was filled with pride as he replied, "Yes, dear. And I couldn't be more proud of us both." Use a warm, empathetic to 6 months had passed since Emma nervously walked into Meadowbrook Press with her portfolio tucked under her arm. Now she stood in Waterstone's bookshop in central London, holding something that still felt like a miracle. In her hands, her very first published children's book. The book was beautiful, with a bright blue cover featuring her own illustration of an old-fashioned telephone surrounded by stars and hearts. The title, written in cheerful yellow letters, "Read the Call That Changed Everything." Emma opened to the dedication page and read the words that meant everything to her, for Henry and Margaret. "Who taught me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose to love and believe in. You." The bookshop was filled with families, children and book lovers who had come to celebrate the launch of Emma's first book. She watched in amazement as parents read her story to their children, pointing at her colorful illustrations and discussing the friendship between Harold and Lucy, the two main characters. Emma had moved out of her tiny flat 2 months ago when her book advance came through. Her new apartment was bright and spacious, with a proper art studio where she could work on her illustrations for the first time since her mother's death. Emma felt financially secure and emotionally happy. Mrs. Patricia Williams from Meadowbrook Press had been thrilled with Emma's work from the moment she saw it. Not only had they published The Call That Changed Everything, but they had already asked Emma to create 2 more books for them. Emma's dream of becoming a children's book illustrator was finally coming true. The most special part of this day, however, was not seeing her book on the shelf or watching children enjoy her drawings. The most wonderful moment came when she saw a familiar figure walking through the bookshop entrance. Henry had travelled all the way from his small cottage in the Cotswolds to London for Emma's book launch. Despite having only seen each other through video calls for the past 8 months, Emma recognized him instantly. His kind blue eyes sparkled with the same warmth she had heard in his voice during all their evening conversations. His gentle smile was exactly as she had always imagined it would be. "My dear Emma," Henry said as he approached her, opening his arms wide. He embraced her like a proud grandfather would hug his beloved granddaughter. "Margaret would have absolutely loved this story and these beautiful pictures you've created." Emma felt tears of pure happiness fill her eyes as she hugged Henry back. She inspired every single page, Henry. "I thought about her courage and kindness while I was drawing each illustration." Standing beside Henry was a tall young man with dark hair and friendly eyes. Emma realized immediately that this must be Thomas, Henry's grandson, who had travelled all the way from Australia for this special occasion. "Emma, this is Thomas," Henry said proudly, putting his arm round the younger man's shoulders. "Thomas, this is Emma, the remarkable young woman I've told you so much about." Thomas smiled warmly and shook Emma's hand. "Grandfather talks about you constantly. Thank you for being such a wonderful friend to him. He's been happier these past few months than I've seen him since grandmother died." Emma watched throughout the evening as Henry and Thomas talked and laughed together. The grandfather and grandson were clearly rebuilding their relationship. sharing stories and making plans for future visits. Henry had told Emma during one of their recent phone calls that Thomas was planning to move back to England next year to be closer to his grandfather. The bookshop celebration continued round them. Emma and Henry found two comfortable chairs in a quiet corner where they could watch families enjoying her book. Children were flipping through the colorful pages, giggling at the illustrations of Harold building birdhouses and Lucy drawing pictures of friendship. "You know, Henry," Emma said thoughtfully, "watching all these families tonight has given me an idea. I've been thinking about starting a special program to connect young people with elderly folks, just like what happened with us." Henry's eyes immediately lit up with interest. "That sounds absolutely wonderful. Dear, tell me more about this idea." Emma leaned forward in her chair, excited to share her vision. "I want to create a service that helps lonely young adults connect with older people who might also be feeling isolated. They could talk on the phone regularly, share their experiences, and help each other through difficult times. We could call it the Right Connection or something like that." "That's a brilliant idea, Emma," Henry said with enthusiasm. "After all, we've learned that sometimes the most beautiful and important friendships begin with the most unexpected phone calls." Emma smiled as she thought back to that rainy evening 8 months ago, when she had almost not answered her phone. She had been sitting in her cold, dark flat with an eviction notice on her table, feeling completely alone in the world. If she had decided not to pick up that call from Henry, her entire life would have taken a completely different path. That wrong number had turned out to be the most right thing that had ever happened to her. It had given her not just a dear friend, but also the courage to believe in herself again, the inspiration to pursue her dreams, and the understanding that hope really can come from the most unexpected places. As Emma watched Henry helping a small boy understand one of her illustrations, she realized something beautiful. Sometimes the family we choose for ourselves becomes the greatest gift life can offer. The end.